So I'm making this video because it's really been bothering me that people overuse the term fake frames, and they simply do not understand the technology. They don't understand how it works, and they're basically mindless sheep, and they go around repeating this term fake frames over and over without really understanding the technology or understanding what they're even talking about. So let's get a baseline going here, okay? So what would be considered a good latency for gaming? And this says anything under 50 milliseconds. I wouldn't agree with that. I would say I'm personally looking more for the 20 range. I want 20 and lower, ideally, for me personally. But anything under 50, I guess, is good. But for your 20 to 40 range would be ideal for responsive, lag-free experience, especially in competitive titles such as multiplayer online shooters. So as long as your latency falls within the 20 to 40 millisecond range, it would be ideal for online competitive multiplayer games. I like to stay under 20 personally. That would be just my personal preference, but let's use 20 as our cap, okay? So anything under 20 would be ideal for competitive, lag-free, responsive input. Okay, keep that in mind. Okay, guys, we have an example here of why your frame rate and your latency are tied together and why you guys do not understand what you're talking about when you say fake frames. So right now, you gotta keep note that I am recording, so this is taking off about 10 frames. But since our base frame rate is so high at the moment, our latency is tied to that. So our latency is under 10 milliseconds, which is instantaneous. It's excellent. And I am not using frame generation at the moment. So look at our frame rate. We're at native 8K with full path tracing and no upscaling whatsoever. No DLSS, no frame generation. And since our frame rate is so low, our latency is extremely high. This is where you start to notice the input latency when you start to get up to these kind of numbers. And when you turn on frame generation, when your base frame rate is this low and your latency is that high, your frame rate is going to go up, but your latency is not going to go up. You are still going to get poor latency because your base frame rate is so low. So I hope this helps some of you guys understand that when it comes to frame generation, it is essential for your base frame rate to be high enough, around 60 or above, that you will not have any conceivable notice of input latency. The only time people do is if they're running older cards and they enable their frame generation and they go from 30 to 60 frames and they say, oh, this feels like shit. Yeah, because your base frame rate is 30. This isn't a hard concept to understand, but I wanted to give a visual here of what the hell I'm talking about.